behind the tiled roofs into the morning sunshine, still standing in the corner of the train as the flat terrain of southern England slid past and a great weight built up steadily in my chest. My first introduction to the RAF was at Lord's Cricket Ground. Masses of forms to fill, medicals, then the issue of an enormous pile of kit. I was billeted in a block of flats in St. John's Wood, luxurious before the lush fittings had been removed. But they couldn't take away the heavy bathroom wear, and one of our blessings was the unlimited hot water gushing at our touch into the expensive surroundings. After that first crowded day, I retired to one of those green-tiled sanctuaries and lathered myself with a new bar of a famous toilet soap, which Helen had put in my bag. I have never been able to use that soap since. Scents are too evocative, and the merest whiff jerks me back to that first night away from my wife and to the feeling I had then. It was a dull, empty ache which never really went away. On the second day, we marched endlessly. Lectures, meals, inoculations. I was used to syringes, but the very sight of them was too much for many of my friends, especially when the doctor took the blood samples. One look at the dark fluid flowing from their veins, and the young men toppled quietly from their chairs, often 4 or 5 in a row, while the orderlies, grinning cheerfully, bore them away. We ate in the London Zoo, and our meals were made interesting by the chatter of monkeys and the roar of lions in the background. But in between, it was march, 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 with our new boots giving us hell. And on this third day, the whole thing was still a blur. We had been awakened, as on my first morning, by the hideous 6 a.m. clattering of dustbin lids. I hadn't really expected a bugle, but I found this noise intolerable. However, at the moment, my only concern was that we had completed the circuit of the park. The gates were only a few yards ahead, and I staggered up to them and halted among my groaning comrades. "Round again, lads," the corporal yelled, and as we stared at him, aghast, he smiled affectionately. "You think this is tough? Wait till they get a hold of you at ITW. I'm just kind of breaking you in gently. You'll thank me for this later. Right, at the double, 1, 2, 1, 2. Bitter thoughts assailed me as I lurched forward once more. Another round of the park would kill me. There was not a shadow of doubt about that. You left a loving wife and a happy home to serve king and country, and this was how they treated you. It wasn't fair. The night before, I had dreamed of Darrowby. I was back in old Mr. Dakin's cow byre. The farmer's patient eyes and the long, drooping moustached face looked down at me from his stooping height. "It looks as though it's over with old Blossom, then," he said, and rested his hand briefly on the old cow's back. It was an enormous, work-swollen hand. Mr. Dakin's gaunt frame carried little flesh, but the grossly thickened fingers bore testimony to a life of toil. I dried off the needle and dropped it into the metal box where I carried my suture materials, scalpels and blades. "Well, it's up to you, of course, Mr. Dakin, but this is the 3rd time I've had to stitch her teats, and I'm afraid it's going to keep on happening." "Ah, it's just the shape she is." The farmer bent and examined the row of knots along the 4-inch scar. "By God, you wouldn't believe it could make such a mess. Just another cow standing on it." "A cow's hoof is sharp," I said. "It's nearly like a knife coming down." That was the worst of very old cows. Their udders dropped and their teats became larger and more pendulous, so that when they lay down in their stalls, the vital milk-producing organ was pushed away to one side into the path of the neighbouring animals. If it wasn't Mabel on the right standing on it, it was Buttercup on the other side. There were only 6 cows in the little cobbled byre with its low roof and wooden partitions, and they all had names. You don't find cows with names anymore, and there aren't any farmers like Mr. Dakin, who somehow scratched a living from a herd of 6 milkers, plus a few calves, pigs, and hens. "Aye, well," he said, "I reckon Todd lass doesn't owe me anything. I remember the night she were born, 12 years ago. She was out of odd Daisy, and I carried her out of this very byre on a sack, and the snow was coming down hard. Since then, I wouldn't like to count how many 1,000 gallons of milk she's turned out. She's still giving 4 a day. No, she doesn't owe me a thing." As if she knew she was the topic of conversation, Blossom turned her head and looked at him. She was the classical picture of an ancient bovine.